Well, what do we have here? A frightened little pup in the big city. Oh, don't try to act tough in front of me, kid. I know you think your dark eyeshadow and black robes with skull motifs makes you look like a powerful dark wizard, but all I see is a frightened little edgelord, hoping the big, bad undead in front of them doesn't eat them. Luckily for you, kid, I won't, because I am civilized. Although if it's someone as delectable as you. Calm down, kid, just having a bit of fun. Truth be told, most undead tend to eat regular food. It's only when you devolve into a ghoul that you start craving the flesh of the living. But enough about me, let's talk about you. Let me guess, you were in some poor village in the middle of nowhere, one you lived in your entire life, and found a tome of dark rituals while hanging out in the local cemetery. And when you saw the pictures of unholy rituals and undead abominations, you suddenly had dreams of becoming a powerful necromancer, with legions of undead under your command. However, there were problems. The first being that you probably couldn't read the tome since, literacy isn't that important in the feudal society you were born in. And secondly, you couldn't find a necromancer to teach you, which makes sense. Most necromancers on the outside are well hidden, because they know the church will probably do horrible things to them. And if you make it known you're looking for those necromancers, the church will probably do horrible things to you as well. But there was one place you heard about where your necromantic dreams could come true. A place told to you as a scary story around the campfire. The Black City, the Zenith, the end of hope, and Zen-Mezeron, the city of 1 billion corpses. You left your little village, and traveled who knows how far to reach here. And probably felt like a badass because you were able to sneak past the church's Lance Knights that regularly patrol the outskirts of the city. Honestly, you shouldn't feel that accomplished. The Lance Knights tend to care more about who leaves the city than who enters it, since they know most of those who enter tend not to return. Okay, that sounded scarier than I intended. Let me back up a bit. So as I said, this is Zen-Mezeron, a necropolis said to be built by those who came before, in honor of some ancient gods with way too many tentacles, from some antediluvian realm of pure madness or something like that. A necropolis that many believe has existed before humanity was a twinkle in some god's eye, and will probably exist long after some other god decides to wipe humanity from existence. And upon this necropolis, many cities and even empires have risen and fallen upon it across the millennia, burying the necropolis in numerous layers of old ruins and necromantic magics. A fate the current city will probably share in a few centuries, since it is ever so slowly descending into hell. Why is it sliding into hell? I honestly don't know. I assume a necromancer wished for ultimate power or something, and didn't read the fine print. Because of this spiral into hell, the numerous ruins of past civilization are often further contorted into nightmarish abyssal dungeons of impossible dimensions, making navigating large swaths of the city both figuratively and sometimes literally maddening. As interesting as the city inexorably sliding into hell is, what makes this place truly special is that in this city no one ever truly dies. Well, that's not really accurate. You can die, quite horribly actually, but you always come back. Your lungs gasping in fetid air as you awaken in a random tomb 6 days later in a new undead form. Well, most of the time anyway. Too many resurrections and your spirit might get a bit, degraded, turning you into various horrible forms. The most common are the ghouls, those undead who have an unhealthy obsession with eating human bodies. They are a big danger in several parts of the city, and they're the main reason the Lance Knights patrol its outskirts, since ghouls tend to escape the city to try to ravage the surrounding countryside. Unfortunate, but great for population control. And it's quite the population. This city draws all sorts, not just from this world, but worlds across dimensions. A combination of the desperate, deranged, and greedy, who come here for dark insights and opportunities, and as they arrive, they tend to scatter out into various points in the city, leading to bazaars and black markets that swirl through abandoned crypts, armories and hideaways built next to decrepit tomb monuments, and scavenger shops and dead spires. Anything a person needs can be found somewhere in this necropolis. Now, most of the people that call this place home are undead, about 40 million or so after the last census, but there are a spattering of living people like you, although they tend not to stay living for long unless they're really lucky or powerful, and most of the time, their deaths are unintentional. I mean, when you live in a place where everyone is undead, ripping off a limb during an argument might seem perfectly reasonable. So if you're gonna live here, kid, try to be as agreeable as possible. Outside the city, the powers of necromancy is seen as an abomination, mainly because it's only granted by a blood communion with the titled devil through a ritual known as the Black Sacrament, a ritual that grants a newly reborn necromancer fell and twisted abilities granted by hell itself, using those powers to create debased and deformed servants, sycophants, homunculi, and familiars that drink in the black venom of the night and ravage the land with their vile sorcery. And that's all true. I'll admit necromancy does tend to attract a certain type of person. Here in the city, though, necromancy is viewed much more favorably, and used quite harmlessly. Well, most of the time. Almost every denizen has a little cantrip or two to aid them in their day-to-day, necessary in a city full to bursting with necromantic energies. That all said, there are those who are dedicated to the craft, true necromancers, those few who undergo a spiritual death, to tie themselves to a titled devil, and become part of their house. These necromancers perform vital services for the city. First off, most undead here tend not to leave the city, because the energies of the city maintain their existence. They step foot out into the wider world, they quickly crumble to dust. So having a necromancer around to keep them up and about on the outside, and also sneak past the last nights, is super useful. There are also places in the city where a necromancer is needed, because even with 40 million undead living here, there are an immense number of unexplored areas containing horrible monsters and terrible traps. I should note though, that necromancers don't spend all their time, necromancing. There are plenty of necromancers around looking for work, but sadly not as many jobs, so most have a side hustle where they perform a variety of roles, such as tour guides, shopkeepers, or even run a food stall or two. Those, though, are your average necromancers. The most powerful necromancers, linked to the most powerful devils in the hells, have no time for such frivolities. These few are dedicated to finding one thing, something they would fight the horrors of the city and each other for: the end of death. You see, kid, many believe that in the center of this necropolis, there is a well of power, the very same power that grants unlife to everyone in the city. And if these necromancers could grasp it, they could essentially become gods. What form this power takes, no one really knows. Could be a black throne, a fallen angel, maybe it's just a pretty plant. Whatever its form, every necromancer with an inkling of ambition aims to make it their own, forming a black mass, the term for a warband composed of a necromancer and their unholy minions, and braving the depths of the city for power and knowledge. Now kid, I can tell you're gonna aim high. If you are, it's not going to be easy. You're gonna have to prove yourself to one of the 6 most powerful houses in the city. I'll give you a rundown of them, so you can pick which one might fit you best. The House of Carcass is what is called a private military company, or PMC, a fancy word for mercenary taken from a probably boring dimension out there in the cosmos. The devil those necromancers worship is the Bone Carapace Devil, the devil's power causing his servant skeletons to fuse and grow over time. And using techniques from their Bone Tactics Bible, these servants are able to create powerful fusions of bone and metal, allowing for the creation of reanimated skeleton warriors and weapon-laden bone constructs. You should probably join them if you want to gain some kick-ass bone power armor, and learn formation tactics to overwhelm your foes with a huge amount of firepower. If you're less about tactics, and more about mindless and up-close violence, the Gore Grinders are probably more your style. They are brutal and ferocious necro warriors and speed freaks that gain their power from the Corpse Piler, a devil that squats over, or is combined with, or is a series of, machine forges close to the hell side of the city. These guys don't use bone, but fuse flesh and metal to create black metal blades, devil blood injectors, infernal engines, and a bunch of other cool sounding stuff. Of course, such mods can be a bit tricky, and if you aren't careful, you'll probably burst into flame as you go into a berserker rage. Extremely painful, but what a way to go. The Gargamoks are filthy. That isn't a slight against them, it's just their thing. Their power is granted by the Filth Devil, who doesn't give a flying undead foot about the formalities of forming a pact. He gives his power to whoever he feels like, usually the beggars, the outcasts, the destitute, and the lost of the city. All those you would generally ignore, or if you were a bit more malicious, abuse. Some believe that this devil does this as a mockery of the Black Sacrament, a way to cull the hubris of the necromancers, and remind them of their origins. I think he's just doing this because he thinks it's funny. If you like the idea of infecting your enemies with a variety of horrifying plagues that do disgusting things to their bodies, this is probably the house for you. When necromancers perform the Black Sacrament, they suffer a sort of spiritual death, rising up again to join a devil's service. Those under the devil Gorgamgor take things a bit further. They not only bind themselves to the devil, but promise their soul to him. When they die, the devil eats their soul, consigning the necromancer to oblivion. Why would they choose to do this? because of the power granted to them by this sacrifice. The power of Gorgamgor makes them immune to spiritual corruption, degradation, and most importantly, the curses of their enemies. And they are the only necromancers that can give true death to their foes, meaning if one of them takes you down, there is no coming back. If you feel like bringing doom upon your enemies, wielding spine blades, and believe yourself so badass you know for certain you won't die, this is the house for you. So a couple of centuries ago, there was a monk by the name of Henrik the Impious, a sort of occultist philosopher who had this brilliant idea. In order for the church to combat the evils of necromancy, it should study and practice it. Well, the church didn't so much like that idea, and their lance knights had him drawn, quartered, and burned. However, his ideas didn't stop with his death. His acolytes, who called themselves the Abhorrers, formed a small cult that left the church and traveled here. It became their mission to use the powers of necromancy to fight the evil at its root. Which is weird, because as far as people know, you need to make a deal with the devil to become a full necromancer. A deal the members of the order deny making. If you want to cast supposedly holy necromantic powers, and wield star metal swords, this is the house for you. The original Igori were composed of 6 old physician families that suffer from grotesque genetic and physical deformities. You know, the kind that we usually have them hiding in church towers, or serving as minions for far less intelligent scientists. Tired of their lot in life, they formed a pact with a multicolored devil to learn necromancy, a power they turned into an art, as they used their knowledge of the sciences to mold flesh like clay. Over the centuries since its formation, the Igori has become a safe haven for experimenters, scientists, and traveling doctors, who wish to advance their studies into realms some would consider unnatural. If you like the idea of creating fleshy abominations that will do your bidding, this is the house for you. I think that was a fairly good rundown, and it gave you quite a bit to think about, I'm sure. How about I buy you some lunch, and we can talk a bit more about your future, kid. This necromancer I know makes the best meat dumplings in the city. Just, don't ask where the meat comes from. Trust me when I say, ignorance is your friend.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video on Maleghast, a necromantic-themed war game where you play as a necromancer going to the depths of a necropolis looking for the end of death, and looking really cool while doing it. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment, press the little bell so you know where I post, etc. so that YouTube guys know I exist and hopefully more people will see my content and learn more about this particular game. If you really like it, you're inclined, and if you have a little cash in your pocket, please also consider giving a little money my way to the Patreon or my Ko-fi account. The extra money gives me a chance to work on these stories that I love. Anyway, thanks for listening/watching, and see you next time.